Just say a quick hi all, and welcome to the next class in what is the class we're up to? It's the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, the
Yeah,
League of Revolutionary Black Workers, Black Panther
yeah.
Party, and associated Detroit movements, part two. Part two. So I will, Wiley's going to sort of chair the session, and we're going to start by introducing our special guest for this week, Luke. So
Okay.
over to you, Wiley.
All right. Well, hi all. I want to introduce you to a very dear friend and comrade. We go back 60 years, and I have a little story. The first time I'm an old track man. Track man means I'm a runner, and we runners who ran competitively think nobody else can run. They can't do what we do. So I go to a picnic. And where I first meet Luke, and this guy's running. So I started running with him, and I figured, well, after a couple of miles, I'll leave him in the dust, right? Well, uh, 3 miles later, my tongue is hanging out, and Luke is still running like a machine. Uh, and I said, who the hell is this guy? But that's how we met on a picnic running, and it's been a wonderful experience since then. We haven't seen each other as much as we would like, but it's just a joy and a privilege to have opportunity to introduce you to him. He has vast experience. Luke has been everywhere, done everything, and I asked him. He spent 2 months in Cuba in 1964, among other things. He is a day one founder of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers Motion. I mean, he's one of the origin people on that. And I have shared that with Shane and others, and I do hope that over time we'll be able to share more that he probably understands and know more about this process than anybody else, other than perhaps Jen, who has made the transition. So with no further ado, I would like to turn it over to Luke to share his experiences, and we'll go from there. You got it, Luke.
Thanks for the invitation. So Wiley asked me to focus on my experience in Cuba in 1964. So first, I guess the question is, how did you get to Cuba? What was the hookup? Okay, so let me give you a little background. Uh, when I was a student at Wayne State University, uh, I was the chair of a Black student organization. The name of our organization was Uhuru. And one member of Uhuru that you're familiar, some of you may be familiar with, is John Williams, right? And we were, Wayne State University is a large research university. It's basically a commuter university, very small residential students there. And it's in basically near the center of Detroit. So it's situated in the a cultural zone of Detroit because you have the large museums around, other institutes, and that was so it's a huge cultural center. And John Williams and I and the members of the Uhuru, we commuted to college. And so the point here is that we spend most, if we were on a campus, we were in our communities. And so we were so it's not like we're kind of isolated and on a campus and sort of separate from that. No, we had daily contact, catching the bus, going to our jobs, and going to the classroom. So I say that to so you understand our activity. I don't think we address any of the so-called campus issues. For instance, like maybe students were trying to get the university to hire more faculty or introduce more, change the curriculum to include more people of color, that sort of thing. our real focus was on the communities that we lived in, right? And that gave us, so when we formed Uhuru, what were we doing? Well, what were the problems in our community? Well, the problems in our community in terms of employment, you would have these chain food stores and these local banks. Oh, now with these chain stores, food stores, we can go there, but you go out and say who was employed, we could not find employment in our own community. These local banks, the same thing. And of course, the schools were deteriorating as the system became blacker, the resources became fewer, right? So these were the kind of issues that we observed that we were experiencing in our own community. So that was our direction. So in Uhuru, we had pickets at food chain stores, we picketed local banks, all these kinds of things, and the police brutality, you know. So it was like living in Detroit in the 60s was like living in Johannesburg, South Africa, you know, in terms of the Gestapo, and that we fully understood that the police presence was not there to serve and protect us. You know, they were on patrol and they're there to control us. So that was our mentality. And then grew up, you know, my father was an auto worker and my uncles, you know, so we know the workers' lifestyle because that's kind of those are the kind of neighborhoods we lived in, and that was our connection with the plants. Okay, so when I came to during high school, the more I learned about how America really operated, you know, I mean, going to schools, you know, both integrated schools, and I see how the racial tracking system in those schools, how the whole discipline was enforced in a biased way, all of those other kinds of things, right? You can see basically the racial patterns in apartheid. And then, of course, during the 1950s, when I was in school, it was a heavy duty anti-Russian propaganda. And whenever whenever they have something to say about Russia or any of the socialist countries, was that well, the Soviet Union, but they just talk about Russia because, you know, they make it simple. So they were talking about the Russian bear, you know, and and how it's an existential threat to America and all. So the propaganda was really heavy, and at the same time, they were basically trying to glorify the U.S. as basically the epitome of democracy, you know, for all attorneys to find it. And we know from our lived experience in terms of what we were describing, how they described the Soviet Union or Russia as totalitarian, people don't have any freedoms and all these other sort of things. Hey, that description sounds like the America we live in as Black people. Okay. So as the more you really began to sort of understand America and how it really operated was I became angry. Of course, I became angrier and angrier, and I began to go to the library and try to educate myself. You know, well, what happened, and then I was seeing what was happening in the Soviet Union, their approach to how they were trying to construct society with a collectivism, and that appealed to me. And at the same time, you know, my father, when he wasn't working on auto plants, we experienced being on welfare, right? And so that welfare experience really showed me what they think about poor people, particularly poor Black folks, you know, that they basically just say on Black folks, particularly poor ones, that utter contempt, despise, and take you through all kind of humiliating processes. For instance, like a lot of times if you qualify for maybe a free lunch, you have to have a pass. That whole going to the cafeteria, having to show that pass and all those humiliating experiences. And then, of course, when we're on welfare in the winter, if we get a little kind of cold allotment, you know, people have these cold stores. Well, everybody they would when they deliver the coal, the truck was out there and just dump it in the street. Okay, so everybody know you're on welfare because your coal is, and you had to take some of the coal. So I mean, I was just relating these little incidents, these everyday kind of humiliations. Okay, so at Wayne State, I was not familiar with any socialist literature, but they had some little uh, uh, groups on the campus that were handing out literature, so they have these little flyers and all that. And the so one, yeah, the literature, like the Communist Manifesto and all, read that manifesto and began to read some of their literature. Then I said, man, this is almost blew me away in terms of basically the brilliance and the insights and all. And so, I began to talk about, I had a friend, Charles Johnson. I said, Johnson, come on, let's go to this forum and go to this. I read this literature. And John Williams, he and Charles Johnson worked at the mailroom. We began to talk. So we began to educate ourselves, and we were drawn very strongly to basically leftist literature and that socialist orientation. And plus, living in America, the more we see it and how brutal it was and how racist it was, uh, we drifted. So Uhuru was basically, when we formed that organization, uh, John Williams, Charles Johnson, and basically we were, I guess we had the strongest Marxist orientation. And then General and Charles Simmons, they had a strong kind of like nationalist oriented organization, but they were kind of open, but they had open mind and open to things. So we drew people in like that, and we began to activism. So what happened is during the 60s, we were, while we were probably, I sent him a paper, maybe he could share with you, and you would can look at the history of Uhuru. So it's just through Uhuru activism, and then we were supporting and active in Ann Arbor, and there were some white leftist groups in Ann Arbor, and they became familiar with what we were doing, and some of the leaders there on the right left said that they told us about they were organizing a student group to go to Cuba. I said, whoa, okay. So they contacted me, and I present the offer to the members of Uhuru. So we read about before, early on, we were really into the revolutions around the globe, including the Cuban Revolution. And we were really inspired by what Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and all, and that was, I mean, we put them on a pedestal, okay, and their defiance and their challenge to the U.S. And we read about the anti-colonial struggles of the Africans, and especially for me, for the Chinese Revolution. I said, hey, how did these people figure to organize 1/4 of humankind and and fight a revolution and stand up to the U.S.? I said, man, that was really, really impressive. So anyway, we hooked up with this white radical group because they were organizing the trip. And 4 of us from Uhuru, General Baker, Charles Simmons, Charles Johnson, and I went on that trip. And so our motivation for going there was basically we went there because we were inspired from them. We knew we probably learned from them, and we wanted to see from ourselves, go beyond this U.S. propaganda, concretely see what these people were doing and how they were doing it. Because we were trying to figure out how we going to liberate how we going to liberate ourselves over here in what we call recently in USA. Okay, so in 1964, we were part of a group of about 80 students. They were from all parts of the other country. Out of the 80 or 90, there were 10 of us were Black, and 4 were from Uhuru, 4 of the 10 Black things. When we returned to two others of the Black students, one from California and the other from another place, came and joined drum in the league. Out of the 10 Black students, there was one Black female student. The other 9 were males. Okay, that was the breakdown. So, what did we observe? What did we see? Well, one of the things that impressed me most was in 2 areas: education and health. Yeah, those were 2 areas, and that was a concentration of what the Cuban government was attempting to do. And that was really, really a smart move. Well, why? Well, first of all, to accomplish anything, you need a healthy population. If most of your folks are unhealthy, you got a lot of resources just to keep them alive and all that. Well, so you really got to have a program to make your population healthy if you want them to become functional and contribute. And the other is education. You have to sort of to build that society, you need certain kind of skills. And then when you build a school system, it's basic organization. Yeah, how you're going to train succeeding generations in the directions, and how you're going to influence the way they think, and how you're going to basically train folks to fit in to the kind of broader structure you're trying to develop. Okay, and they have to have a certain kind of mindset. They have to have a certain kind of skills and all. So in the area of education, the Cubans said the first thing, what we're going to do is we're going to wipe out illiteracy. So there was a lot of focus. Those who had the educational skills, reading skills and all that, we're going to send these young people out to the countryside and to these rural areas and all that, because in order for us to really develop, we need a highly educated or literate population. That's what we need. So there was a real emphasis on that. And the other is with the health component. They said, well, number one, we're going to organize, and we're going to have the health system based in the community and themselves. So you go to a school, virtually all the school had a nurse or something in that school. Kids get sick and all that sort of thing. We're going to have the service. We're going to build it in, right? Because health and education, that's all that community did. Those are going to be key points of organization and inputs that we're going to have in any community. So they were organizing things at a community level and basically focusing on the basic things they were trying to do: improve the health of the population and educate our population. Okay. And so those were some of the strategic things that they were doing. And of course, as I said before, those who knew skills would teach skills, right? So even older students were teaching the younger students. Right? Now, in terms of in the youth, one thing it was electric when we went to these rallies, to these stadiums, and the youth were all over the place. And there you could go into that stadium to see the energy there. And it was promoting kind of patriotism, a kind of comradeship among the various groups. So one thing was the high spirit of the Cuban people, especially the youth, right? So there was a lot of dynamism, in there in 1964. Okay. And what they were also doing, of course, is that one of the, there was sort of as you know, a racial hierarchy in Cuba. Okay. And then, of course, you begin to understand basically why most of the most reactionary and backward, politically conservative or reactionary Cubans, Latinos in America, are the Cubans in Florida. Okay, so that was part of the white Blanco elite, that said, because they were the ones what the Cuban government did is you had all these little mansions and where the wealth was kind of sort of concentrated. So what the Cuban government did is all of those big mansions and all, many of them they turned those into um, um, children's centers, right? Where people and they changed them to educational spaces, or they changed them to museums and all that. In other words, how can we get these properties of that ruling class and turn these resources over to the people, right? So the first thing they learn, we're going to have cultural institutions, we're going to have educational institutions, and that's how we're going to use these buildings, in this property. So it's like taking things from the private field and bring them into the public field. So it's transformation from private to public, right? So that was one of the things that were happening. And of course, over in a lot of rural areas, they didn't have a lot of a few developed schools and all, right? So what they did is they began to build large educational complexes, right? And particularly for what happened is like, like in this society during the summer months, kids would go to camps and that sort of thing. Well, that's what they had in Cuba. They had huge, big complexes. And then it's because when they go in their local schools, they go there sometimes. In some of the schools and facilities in the urban areas, of course, were much more developed than in these rural areas. So during particularly these students in the rural areas will go to these large complexes where there are a lot of gyms and things like that and have activities. So it's almost a year-round thing. But as I said before, in trying to transform their society, they say, well, who are going to really take the society to the next stage are the ones we got to train right now. So they know where we're going and why we're doing it. Like I said, be the leaders. Okay, the other thing is that the Cubans hosted basically all groups that were involved in revolutionary activity, right? If some were from Africa and Asia and other Latin America, so Cuba was like a draw, for all those at the forefront of these struggles. And of course, it was also a refuge for political exiles. And one was Robert Williams, and he found refuge in Cuba, right, as he fled from the Raceland, USA, because he was involved, of course, of Black liberation work. Because once you get involved in any kind of Black liberation work or any kind of work against capitalism, you automatically labeled and you become a target. Okay. So anyway, we have been there because we admired and what he had done and what he was and an influence that he had in the Black liberation movement. Okay, so we had the opportunity to meet these other revolutionary fighters from across the world, and especially those from Vietnam. So Cuba was a host of a lot of Vietnamese fighters, and so I remember this one event we went to, and they were basically in the National Liberation Front of the Vietnamese were their speakers were there, and of course many of the Vietnamese not speak English. Maybe some of us speak a little Spanish, but some. But anyway, the point here is that when we met them, I didn't have many conversations with them, but I was close enough to them, and I looked in their faces and their eyes. And then, I mean, it's just like a kind of vibration. I said, there's no force in the world that can defeat these people. America has nuclear weapons, they can blow them off the planet, but they're not going to defeat them, if they come out there just to take them over. That's just not going to happen. I mean, it was that kind of resolve, that kind of determination that you can just feel. And you're messing with the wrong folks over here, right? If you try to go there anywhere from toe to toe, get close to them, they're going to figure out a way to defeat you. And that's what they actually did. The U.S. was so arrogant, just like it is in 2026, trying to mess with the Iranians and all this sort of thing, right? I mean, these people are very innovative, very creative, and figure out a way to you. And they are going to come up with methods and ways of dealing with you to bring you down. I mean, so you got your generals and all coming from West Point, you got all the high tech and all that sort of thing. Well, they're not going to match you with tech and all those other kind of techniques. She said, we know our terrain, we know who we are, we know we have studied your tactics and your strategy, right? And we know your Achilles heels, and we can know where your Achilles heels are, okay? And you see what happened, okay? Always this arrogance, this racist arrogance that they have towards people call it, they didn't think because they got all the technical tools and all that, they just go in there and do what they want to do with it, right? Okay. So those are, the main thing was in terms of what the direction of the Cuban Revolution and how they were trying to change their society and their strategies that they were using, right? That was in 1964. 20 years later, I went back to Cuba, 1984, right? And of course, in 1984, hey, that's Reagan's time, okay? And of course, the Black Liberation Movement was on its back foot, because in the 70s, you had the Republicans came in, and so from the early 70s on through, it's been the big backlash, right? Black folks have been basically on the defensive, just right. Here in 1986, we're still on the defensive, on the back for attacking DAI, our environmental. So it really got that momentum. And part of that, I think, was the big, huge backlash, with the Reagan administration, got those pieces in places and has been pushing ever since, for that. I mean, there's been some small victories, but the general political shift in the center has been constantly moving since that 70 towards the left, and you see what happened to the strength of unions, right? Boom. Environmental protection, boom. Okay. And now, then, the rise of the green strength of fascism, right? Okay, that sort of thing. So it's seen those kind of changes. Well, that, going back to Cuba, so during the Reagan administration and all that, okay, it was so things became more and more difficult in Cuba, That's when in 64 they had the strong Soviet support there. There was a whole lot of stuff there, but now the policies and the way that they're trying to strangle Cuba presently, I mean, they're really trying to choke it to death right now. Hey, they're trying all this other, so it just has intensified. Now with Marco in there, or really what they call a gusano, these white racist Cubans, so in a very bad way, right? So since the 1960s, Cuba, I mean, I think despite all of those barriers and the ways that the U.S. has tried to hog-tie them, Cuba was, I mean, they were able to produce one of the most literate populations in Latin America, in the Caribbean, and one of the best health systems in that, despite the limitation of their resources, despite how the U.S. was trying to. And I guess that has to do with the energy and the brilliance of the Cuban leadership, you know. So I think a lot of other countries would have been crushed, but they got their foot on the ground early on after in 1959 to start building the focus on the people as a resource, and we need the people to be healthy, and we need the people to be educated. And once those conditions are met, then we can go to the next step and figure out how we can survive, how we can advance, how we can maintain the wins we already have, you know, through this. So that's part of my background, and you know, I can entertain any questions, but that's the basic.
All right, thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Okay, folks. Now you know everybody know I can't see a lick. So Shane,
I'll take it.
will
Yeah.
you take responsibility?
Yeah.
Folks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I had just a couple of quick ones. Jennifer's asking Elizabeth is asking the thing. Were there any women on the tour, Cuba tour, Luke? Did you say?
One.
Yeah.
I said there was one Black woman, but about I'd say maybe half of the other group were women.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. And yeah, I suppose the other thing I was like, apart from the sort of inspiration, was there any sort of concrete things that you brought back to the struggle in the US? Like, obviously you felt more motivated and connected with people, but I was interested in how did it sort of translate directly into, you know, strategy and tactics or anything like that?
Well, personally, one
Mm.
is that among the other groups that were there was a Canadian group, and these were French Canadians from Quebec. Okay.
Yeah.
And what happened is that it was through that connection that I was resisting the draft. They attempted to draft me into the military, and so I became self-political exile. And I was exiled in Quebec, Cuba, not Toronto, Canada. I went to Quebec, and it had to do with that French
Nice.
connection I had with that.
Nice.
So
Nice.
that was concrete.
Yeah. George.
Yes. I would like to ask a question, Luke. First of all, thank you a lot for this moving presentation. You said that they promoted the development of the health system in order to have the population healthy and in the logic of such population being productive. Okay. That's the idea that I suppose.
That's right. That's right.
But I would like to ask you whether there was something else also. Because when you try to have the population healthy, it means that we want to alleviate any possible sufferance, any kind of pain, let's say, that the people feel under this condition, which means, that's my question. Is there any sense that they wanted to uphold the dignity of the people? Not only, you know, looking upon them as a kind of productive form of power that you have to keep it healthy, because even capitalist logic has this kind of idea. Okay, I want my labor force. I mean, they want to have the labor force healthy in order to be productive. But what I'm asking is that there is a kind of ethical side also. You want to keep the population healthy because you recognize its dignity, to live a kind of dignified life. And I would like to connect that with the point that you made concerning the Detroit community that you were living. You said the welfare experience was really awful, but it was characterized by quite a few humiliations. So don't you see that there is a kind of effect also, a strategy, if you like, to to subtract or disregard the dignity of the black people undergoing or being assisted by welfare. In other words, what I'm saying is that there is a kind of ruthless attitude on the part of the system that, okay, we are going to provide you with some welfare support in order not to die, but at the same time, you have to pay in terms of dignity, loss of dignity in order to appropriate the goods that we are delivering to you. So that's my question. Do you see any connection in terms of dignity?
Yeah, I sort of see your point. Okay, I'll do it in terms of, let me use this approach. We know that under slavery, the slaves are the workforce. And so the slave owner has a vested interest in having healthy slaves, right? So he's concerned about their health because they provide the energy and the work to produce his profits. Okay, so it's not so in what I know from experience, lived experience, and all this, right? I'm gonna go back and answer your question, right? The big price that poor people pay in general for poverty is dignity, right? If you go out there and have to have charity, how's it going to affect you? Who wants to be a charity kid? So it's going to make you feel bad. It's going to make you feel less worthy, and it's going to make you feel dependent. And you don't want to feel dependent. You don't want to feel that because at the cost of your dignity, right? So you have to eat humble pie to get the stuff, right? Okay. In the case of, so the point here is that you can't de-link dignity from poverty because it puts you in a position of being a charity and handout, and then plus, your esteem, self-esteem, and how you view by others, and all that sort of thing, right? People don't want to feel proud and feel, independent and all that sort of thing, right? Okay. So the Cuban government, in terms of its approach, the point here is that they say, well, we just want a healthy workforce, and so we got to. That was not in. That's why they tried to basically. That's where the part of the patriotism, feeling proud to be a Cuban, feeling proud to that, and then the energy and energetic, and that. But as a kind of old folk right now, if you're unhealthy, what kind of contribution can you make? You're dependent. As a matter of fact, in terms of an asset, you're a liability, right? So the first thing is you have to do, and from what we know is, this is one of the values I kind of I constantly talk about with family members and all that. I said, number one, your number one priority should be your health. While I talked about, we running and all that sort of thing, that was part of that. I said, I've learned early on, if I'm not in good shape, if I'm not healthy, I cannot function mentally or physically at all. So I said, so I had to organize a lot of my activity in terms of staying healthy, right? And so right now, I'm 85 years old. Okay. And it's due to that kind of discipline, not kind of prioritizing health, physical and mental health, to maintain the capacity to do the other things you need to do. Okay. So and then because if you want to protect your dignity and all that sort of thing, you better keep yourself healthy. Else you lose that, you're gonna eat humble pie. Okay.
Thank you.
Cynthia.
Oh, Luke, thank you so much. It was excellent. I'm wondering if you could make a connection between your experience in Cuba, what you learned there, and how you brought it back to the work you did in Detroit with the revolutionary movement in Detroit. Um, I would, if you could speak to that, I would appreciate it. Excellent. I really appreciated listening to you.
Thank you. Some of the takeaways, as I said before, before the trip to Cuba, we were just, I and others were already kind of inspired and about going to Cuba because, you know, to go to Cuba, of course, the U.S. banned travel to Cuba. You know, going to Cuba, what we had to do is we got a regular flight over into Paris, France. And then from France, got a flight to Czechoslovakia. And then from Czechoslovakia, that's how we get to Cuba. Okay. Because that was the way, you know. So that was a thing, challenging. There's some other stories. But anyway, part of by going to Cuba, we became more inspired, right? As I said before, Charles Simmons, General Baker, myself, Charles Johnson, and all. To this day, let me see, the only like Charles Simmons and I are the only ones still living, right? And it's that Cubans and that Cuban experience was kind of key to to the kind of connections that we have made and our commitments, you know, to that. And so my takeaway is that number one is that we can learn from other folks and we get inspiration for other folks, but other folks cannot solve the problems, our problems. They don't have the lived experience. They don't have they're not in that concrete situation. But the general things, that's why you read about other revolutions. There's some takeaways we can takeaways from learning and reading about these other institutions. For instance, like I think how we benefited from the study of Marxism and Leninism and their emphasis on the working class. And we say, here we are in the United States, in a key industrial city, in the key industry, in the system, all the industry, all those, what do you need to make an automobile? You need steel, you need rubber, you need skills, all of those things. And then we have a force. And we understand that basically from the Black standpoint, we have basically two forms of economic power, right? And we have seen one form demonstrated, like in the Civil Rights Movement, in terms of boycotting the buses, you know, Montgomery boycott. So you had consumer power. And I said, well, we got more in Detroit. We have leverage with productive power. And so we kind of organize that productive power and how to do it. Well, we started reading the Bolshevik Revolution, the Levins, and how they feel of these things and how they began to concentrate. So unlike other groups, like for instance, like the Black Panthers, they going out there and say, well, we got to get the brother on the street, the lumpen. I said, man, that's the wrong move. We got to go for these workers because we know these workers are disciplined, they're organized, they have further commitments. And if you go in and try to organize the guys at the pool hall, it's the wrong place to be to do some serious organizations and get leadership. Okay. So we get the inspiration and some of the strategies used by revolutionaries in terms of Cuba and that experience and all. But concretely, we got to do this stuff ourselves with these general principles, these general ideas. We got that, but we can't say, Castro, what should we do right now? No, we can answer that question by our lived experience. Okay, so that's the takeaway. We get the inspiration with some general principles and studying the lessons and understanding in that environment, in that situation, you just to apply and develop critical thinking. You know, asking questions, interrogating these questions, and how should we make the next move? We're not up there looking for a recipe, you know. No, you just gotta know how to analyze things, know how to break things down, know the dynamics of a situation, and have some level of sophistication. You know, otherwise you go like we're involved in the Black Panther. Hey man, let's just off the pig. Oh, we tired of all this talking. Come on, let's go down there and that kind of nonsense. You know, that kind of infantile teenage kind of mentality. Okay. And so you're going to have to become sophisticated and figure out that basically you're going to have people inside and outside. You know, some are inside the system and some are outside the system. Some of the that are working inside the system can be very helpful, so you don't alienate them and all that sort of thing, right? And so they're with you to a certain point. They don't say, "Hey, I'm revolutionary," but maybe they're just reformists, but they can help you along the way. When we had an office in the league, that building, that a site was offered to us by a black realtor. He said, "Hey, there you go. I agree with what you're saying. You can use my building, okay, and all that. Don't worry about it." You know, so you get the elements from various folks, and they kind of appreciate what you're doing, and yeah, so he's a little realtor, a little capitalist, and all that sort of thing. But hey, okay, okay, so it's just being real, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, any other questions? Well, Luke, thanks, man. Thanks a lot. We hope this is the beginning. We've been on this long journey, you, I, Cynthia, all of us, and just another step toward our eventual victory. You gonna hang, ain't you, man? Here, the rest of this thing, ain't you?
Yeah, after I go to the bathroom.
Yeah, okay, good.
Very good.
But then I'm gonna move the agenda.
Okay, all right, I'll be right back. Okay, go ahead.
Right, we got a
Thanks,
young
Luke.
brother coming on board. Alan is next. I'm going to ask Alan next to give. Last week he wasn't able to finish his presentation, so if it's okay with the group, we want to take the time now to give Alan an opportunity to remarks on his experience as a young revolutionary in a hellish time in Chicago. Take it away, Alan.
Okay. Hello, Wiley. Thank you. And hello, everybody. Just a second. Got some audio problems. First, I see Luke has stepped away. I do want to thank Luke for his presentation. It was most enlightening, especially hearing about Cuba. Cuba at a specific time. The earliest days in the 1960s, in the earliest days of the revolution and of socialism in Cuba. I mean, the way what he described fit everything else I've ever heard about Cuba. At the time it was happening. I mean, it was so, just hearing it was inspiring. And so I want to thank Luke for that. The other is about Detroit. Um, this kind of fits into where I want to start. Detroit was the rebellion in Detroit in July of 1967, also the rebellion in Newark in July of 1967, affected me personally deeply. I was in Chicago. I watched it on television. It was as an uprising, it was awesome. Never saw anything like it. And it was during that time that I started hearing about a book, and which is not what I'm about to read in my paper, but the book that I heard about was called The Wretched of the Earth, and it's by Frantz Fanon. And when I heard about it, I became extremely interested, and I spent the next 6 months looking all over Chicago for that book. It was hard to find, but I finally did. I did find it, and I still have it. Um, about myself, I just want to say, number one, I'm I'm from a different decade from Luke and Wiley, in that I was a teenager in the 1960s, and I was in high school in the middle and late 1960s. And what I'm about to read to you is Wiley wanted me to sort of describe um, particularly the whole point about the Black Panther Party from the standpoint of my own experience at the time as I was when I was growing up. Um, it's true that as they say that the Panthers the Panthers kind of were a movement that drew from what some folks call the lumpen. Uh, the Panthers and actually all of us, they were just the dudes down the street, the brothers on the block kind of thing. Very common feature of life in the big city back in the 20th century. But um, they that really became, I wouldn't say the core, but it was sort of like the the main ground out of which the organization drew its members. But the Panthers were, I was telling Wiley, the Panthers were more than just an organization and its structure. The Panthers were much broader in that they were an idea. And the idea of the Panthers spread spread everywhere. It was part of what was happening among the youth, and particularly the teenagers and the college students in the 1960s. This Black consciousness, which which just spread everywhere. The idea of the Panthers spread alongside the idea of Black consciousness, that Black is beautiful. The change, people started wearing their hair, started wearing natural hairstyles and wearing dashikis and stuff like this. Africa, you know, we were all um, our minds were changed. You know, we changed from the old Negro mentality, which suddenly, was like shameful to something that we could be proud of, that especially the example provided by the Africans, their 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 independence from colonialism, their national liberation movements, like such as in Kenya and Angola and places like that. We drew from that. That changed us. Um, I was never in a gang or anything. I wore glasses. I was kind of bookish, but those dudes were my friends, and we all grew up together, and you know, we were we were all changed by that. So, a lot of the people that I'm going to start talking about, some of them were like me. We weren't in gangs. There was a big gang war going on in Chicago in the 60s, and some of us were, but they became politicized. They may have been lumpins, but they didn't, or thuggish or whatever you want to call them, but they didn't stay that way. You know, and they had an example to look up to, which was Malcolm X. He too. He too was a criminal. He was a gangster and everything. He went into prison. He was criminal. He came out as something else entirely. So, with that, if it's okay, Shane, or Wiley, so do I read my paper
Yeah,
here?
yeah, do whatever you will, man. Tell your story. We need to hear it. Come on.
All right
So
then.
you got we got
All right.
Shane, we're good on time, are we, Shane? Yeah, yeah.
Hold on. Zoom is not doing what I want it to do.
Okay.
All right. So can everyone see the screen share?
If you could
Everybody
make
good with
it
you?
larger, I would appreciate it.
Okay, I'm trying to do just that.
Okay, thank you.
I can't.
Down below at the bottom of the of your document.
I'm doing that. The taskbar won't move. I'm trying to move
Oh,
the
okay.
taskbar out of the way.
Okay, sorry.
I know that problem.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay, got it. All right, let's magnify this. How's that, Cynthia?
It didn't get larger,
Yeah, it did.
did it? No.
Yeah, not a lot, but it did some. You,
Right.
and it's just a blind man talking. I see it.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. Anyway, it's all right. Just read it. For me, it's a blur, but that's okay. That's my problem. Okay, go for it. Yeah.
If you wanted to send it to me, Alan, I can put it around the group if you didn't mind that.
Oh,
Well, not now, at the end, and then
I'll,
people can read it if they want.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
do.
Why don't you start reading, Alan? Because that's how
Yeah.
we're gonna see it. Just start reading. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
In May 1968, at 16, I first heard of Huey Newton while playing basketball on Chicago's South Side. One of the guys we were playing with described a bad dude in California, unnamed, who was in jail for killing an Oakland cop. That Newton's fame spread by word of mouth across the country from teenager to teenager illustrated what mattered about his party. It was urban, rooted among people who remembered Malcolm X, and it spread as an idea, Black pride, self-defense, and resistance, especially among youth. By summer of 1968, Newton's name appeared in the local papers. In August, before the Democratic National Convention, Panthers were arrested near a church near a church where Senator Eugene McCarthy spoke. That same summer, Chicago's Black student militants organized a high school walkout for October 14, 1968. It succeeded massively, with 35,000 students participating. The Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party was founded in Chicago on November 1, 1968. It was headed by Fred Hampton, whose title was deputy chairman. Its office was in one of the city's two largest Black communities, the West Side, at 2350 West Madison Street. The South Side of Chicago, where I was born in 1951 and grew up, is home of the older Black community. During the winter of 1968-69, the Black Panther newspaper spread throughout the Black community and elsewhere in the city. In January 1969, the Panther paper, reached Harlan High School, where I was in my third year, part of the graduating class of 1970. I was in a militant group called the Black Youth Organization, or BYO. It had about 20 or so members, male and female, who were Harlan students, but not Panther members, except for a slightly older member who was himself a party cadre. The BYO got the Panther papers from the cadre, turned them, and then he turned over the proceeds to the headquarters on the west side. Both years, my junior and senior year, the 1970 student government, that's badly written, the student government at my school was all BYO. The class president, the class vice president, everybody, they were all part of my group. The class of 1970, the students, the Harlan students supported us. They supported the BYO, and the BYO supported the Panthers. We sold the paper in the hallways when the students were changing classes. We sold them in study hall, in the lunchroom, in the boys' gym locker room, and maybe the girls also. I don't really know. In late 1968, the Illinois chapter had attempted to unite with the Blackstone Rangers street gang on the South Side. The Ranger Nation had an estimated 10,000 members. The effort failed because of anonymous letters sent to Panther and Ranger leaders, each letter to one leader threatening the other. Congressional hearings in the mid-1970s disclosed that it was the FBI which sent those poison pen letters under the COINTELPRO operation that they had. In the spring of 1969, the Panthers formed an alliance with the Disciples street gang, archenemy of the Rangers, and that quickly fell apart. Unable to bring together the two main South Side gangs, Deputy Chairman Fred turned to the North Side of Chicago, where he famously succeeded in establishing the Rainbow Coalition of the Panthers, the Young Lords, and the Young Patriots. The Young Lords were a Puerto Rican organization, and the Young Patriots were an organization of Appalachian whites. That was in the summer of 1969, and right then is when the first of several gun battles broke out between the Panthers and the Chicago police. The first was in June, and it didn't cause any serious injuries or damage, but the gun battles that followed in the summer and fall grew worse. On July 14, Panther member Larry Roberson was wounded in a shootout with Chicago police, and he died of his wounds at Cook County Hospital on September 4, 1969. In October, on the west side, the police killed a young man named John Soto. His brother Michael, who was in the U.S. Army, returned to Chicago from Vietnam to attend John's funeral, and the police killed him that very same day. On the weekend of October 11th to 12th, the Panthers inside the headquarters building shot it out with Chicago police. The battle culminated with the police setting fire to the building, which suffered further smoke and water damage from the fire department hoses. I visited that headquarters on Monday, the 13th of October. The steel front door was covered with blast holes, bullet blast holes from police gunfire. The building's outer walls were pockmarked all around the windows, and the first floor of the office was a total mess. There were water-soaked Panther papers everywhere on the floor. In November 1969, the scene shifted to the South Side, where on Thursday the 13th, 17-year-old party member Spurgeon Jake Winters killed 3 Chicago police officers and wounded 8 others before the police killed Winters. A second Panther, Lance Bell, was wounded. I've always believed that this battle set the stage for what happened exactly 3 weeks later. Of the murder for themselves. On Tuesday, the 9th of December, I went to the funeral home on the west side to see Fred's body in a casket. Looking at Fred's face, I saw a skin graft on the right side of his neck, about here where I'm pointing, covering a bullet hole. Years later, it came out that a Panther member named William O'Neill was a paid FBI informant. O'Neill drew the floor plan of the apartment on a sheet of paper and gave it to the special agent in charge of the FBI in Chicago, who then passed the floor plan to Hanrahan. Meanwhile, in September of 1969, a new CTA station opened near Harlan High School, my school, which launched a new South Side rail line. A formal ceremony featured Mayor Daley, top city officials, the governor of Illinois, and the U.S. Secretary of Transportation. Around 10 a.m., while our class was having our attendance period, our class president, BYO class president, got up, delivered a fiery speech denouncing the train as a plot against the Black community. This train will take you downtown on time. It will bring you back home on time, and it will bring the National Guard out to your crib on time. He called for a walkout and a protest at the ceremony, and about 1,000 students walked out. We went over to the dedication, and when we arrived, Mayor Daley was in the middle of a speech. We raised our hands and chanted, "Pig, pig, and pig." He tried to read on, And then he did something rare. He stopped. He folded his remarks up, turned away from the microphones, and struck up the fire department band to drown us out. A few days later, trouble followed. The entire class of 70 student government was suspended, sparking outrage at the school and in the community. In Senior Hall, angry students stirred up a disturbance, drawing our law and order principal and his assistant into the auditorium to try and calm us down. We took them hostage. We blocking the auditorium and the backstage doors and refusing to let them leave until the suspension was lifted. After about an hour, the principal relented. A stormy meeting with outraged parents from the community followed, echoing the students' anger. The student government was unsuspended, which was a victory, but the man downtown was not finished with us. In January 1970, Chicago police began a bizarre helicopter surveillance program on the far south side where we lived. It was called Operation Falcon. Falcon was the team name of our school because our school colors were Air Force blue and white. From January to March in 1970, the police pressured us. In February, for example, we were having a Friday BYO meeting at a church in the neighborhood. The police surrounded the entire block around the church, entered our meeting room, and ordered us out of the church. Outside, we walked away, never looking at the police or at the helicopter hovering above us. I and 3 BYO friends of mine took a taxi back to my house with the helicopter following us overhead. We explained to the taxi driver what our situation was and can you help us out? The taxi driver eluded the copter by turning off his headlights and driving down side streets where there were large trees blocking the view from above. That worked. The copter ended up flying in circles above the area where they last saw us. The taxi driver is what I mean about the Panthers not being just a group, but an idea moving the masses. We graduated, the class of 1970, we graduated on June 19. The thing about the police, between 1968, especially from 1968 to about 1970, the police were actually coming down on all the youth all over Chicago. It wasn't just us and what it was we did. It was a real conflict. It was basically I don't know if it was a crime to be a teenager, but it sure felt like it sometimes because even ourselves every day every day was something. We would have to one of our members would get arrested um, for some nothing reason. They would get arrested. We had to get them out of jail, call a lawyer, get them out of jail, do this, do that. And then the next day, something else would happen. It was always something one day after another. And that was basically how it was for young people, not just the gangs, but also the militants and the activists around Chicago and the Chicago police. So even though specifically there was this violent clash going on between the Panthers and the police, it wasn't just the Panthers who the police were after. So it was really it was really a intense period to live through. I think I'll just leave it at there. And if anyone has any questions or if there's something, I need to explain further, you're welcome to ask, of course.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, I'm going to take this paper down now from screen share.
Okay, and while you're doing that, I'm throwing back to Shane to honor questions that people might have.
Yeah, we got George. George, you can.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Alan. I would like to ask you a question. I come from a culture which is thousands of miles away from United States, but still the representation of the Black Panther movement that I have, and it was, let's say, the one established in my own culture, is a very positive one. The Panther movement represented the struggle of the blacks to liberate themselves, to gain rights, to better their position as a kind of very, very, very positive type of movement. And I would like to ask you the following. Is there any kind of resonance of this historical period and of the Black Panther movement for the contemporary Black community, for the contemporary Black consciousness? Are there any kind of symbols, slogans, gestures, songs, I don't know what, that have been adopted, let's say, and used in contemporary Black consciousness or in communities, in youth, or more broadly speaking? That's my question.
Yes, I would say yes. After the 60s, um, I don't want to make this a long answer, but after the 60s, life went on, and the times changed, and in a in a way, I wouldn't, yeah, in a way, the Panthers were kind of forgotten. In fact, that whole period was kind of forgotten. Even Malcolm X was forgotten, but it was the young people in the 1980s, the young people who started hip hop in the 1980s, who never knew Malcolm X. They discovered Malcolm X, and uh, they brought Malcolm X back to the streets of America. If you remember the popular caps, baseball caps that kids wore that had the X on the front, that was it. Michael Jordan and Spike Lee and people like that. They're the ones who started that and got it going. That kind of a thing. I think similarly, something like that, what you're asking, George, is happening about now. The young generation coming out of the Black Lives Matter movement, the young generation coming out of others in this country who were part of the Palestine Solidarity movement. Just, I mean, there's so many movements going on right now in this country against ICE and against fascism. In that in that in that setting, there has been sort of a revival of interest in the Panthers. A lot of people are interested in the Panthers. There are some groups that have formed, armed groups that have formed, and they've taken the name of Black Panther Party. Um, some people kind of dispute whether, that's good or bad or right or wrong, but it's a fact. And so uh, there's a revival and interest in Huey Newton, especially. Um, I think he's as famous as ever now, as he was, 60 years ago. So yes, in that kind of sense, something like that is happening now. Obviously, the, especially the younger generations, see that they see the relevance of Malcolm X. They see the relevance of Huey Newton, but more importantly, the example of Malcolm and the example of the Panthers is what the young people seem to be seizing on, because they think I can see why. We kind of need the Panthers nowadays. I mean, the police are out here killing everybody. ICE is out here killing everybody. This is what brought the Panthers in existence in the first place, 60 years ago, and we're still dealing with it now. So Yes, George, yes, there is something like that. You can very easily see.
Cool. Nice.
You're welcome.
So, Shane, how are we doing for time? Oh,
No,
Shane,
no, sorry, I just had myself on mute. There's no one on the playlist, so I don't know. Just
are we okay for time?
yeah,
Jennifer
yeah.
raised the
Well,
question.
you got half an hour to go.
Oh, okay.
Jennifer's got a question, but I think
Oh,
Cynthia is
sure, no
going to
problem.
address some of that. So we might just. And Leah's not here, Wally, or
Yeah, she's here, but I'm not rushing. I'm just trying to keep a handle on it. I don't want to. I'm not trying to stifle or anything. I just trying to get it
no.
checked. No problem. Go for it, Jennifer.
We got half hour, so I thought.
All right, good. Go for Jennifer. Jennifer got me.
Yeah. So Cynthia and then Leah, or
Yeah, let me go.
No. Did Jennifer have a question?
Yes,
Yeah. Did Jennifer had a
but
question, right?
she wrote the question in the chat box.
Oh.
Jennifer. I'll read
Oh.
Jennifer's question, but I think Cynthia will speak to it. So
Oh.
as well. So Jennifer's question is she'd
Okay.
like to hear more about the BYO, the Black Panthers, Young Patriots, and Young Lords, and the conflicts and collaboration between them, and what
Okay.
stopped them coming together.
Yeah.
And that
Well,
sort of overlaps with what Cynthia is going to say, I think. So maybe
right.
Cynthia, and then we can come back to that question.
Okay, can we do this thing? Why don't we go, your last name, you want to go now? Huh? Leah doesn't want to speak right now. She has issues with her throat. So why don't we go directly to Cynthia?
All yours, Cynthia.
Okay, so I guess what I'd like to start with is just following up on what Luke and Alan talked about in terms of the experience of living in a violent community, what it was like to be threatened by the authorities, by the police in every respect, and just to bring out what perhaps is not known by people outside of the United States, or maybe most people in the United States, is that since data has been collected, the yearly average of people killed by the police is from 1,200 to 1,500 persons a year. 83 to 87% of them are unarmed and have not been involved or are not involved in any violent activity. Just innocent, unarmed people shot down by the police. And the largest, the populations that have the greatest percentage of deaths are Black, Native American, and Latinos. But what's also extremely, how to say, probably even greater in terms of its impact on the lives that people live, in terms of constraining the ability to live freely in this country, is the incidence of police brutality and violence that does not necessarily lead to death, but involves injuries. Again, the data shows that over 300,000 people are victims of police violence without cause. I mean, obviously, you are aware of the phrase driving while black, and there are all kinds of variations on that. And just looking at a white man the wrong way. there are 300,000 instances of brutality and violence, and they estimate that about 100,000 to 200,000 involve injuries. So what I wanted to bring out, and it's been mentioned, and it's the theme throughout both of the previous speakers, is that this violence is aimed at certain communities that are isolated from other communities in any given area, whether they're isolated areas, we call them ghettos or hoods, inside of urban centers, and then isolated in rural areas also. But it's always aimed at working class communities. The incidence of such violence does not hit the wealthy, and does not hit, for the most part, the middle class. So, I mean, it's already been described about the discrimination and poverty that clusters people in dense communities that are challenged in multiple ways, in terms of the experience of living in a dangerous, crowded areas without resources. They're in, like, I mean, I lived in both Chicago and LA, and they're characterized by lack of health facilities, lack of supermarkets. The only way to get food is at convenience stores where food is expensive, rotten. The schools have poorly trained teachers, decrepit facilities, and the other thing is the lack of recreation. I live in an area right now, just because my home burned, I had to move, and I live in an area now where there are parks every 3 or 4 blocks. I lived in South Central LA for 25 years, not one single park. Well, that's not true. There's 2 large parks, but the area is extremely large. But being available to just kids in the community, no parks, no recreation, no baseball, soccer, basketball. Anyway, so I think the other thing to bring out, I think, is what's been spoken to already, is that the experience of living in, well, specifically in LA with my 25 years there, the police are an occupying force, and they view the population as an enemy who must be monitored and controlled. And as I feel it from having experienced it, and what I know of Gaza, there definitely is a similarity. It's of course not as extreme, but the intention of the federal and state and local institutions is to subject people in such a way that it prevents or discourages resistance, right? But of course, it absolutely creates the conditions for resistance, just as Luke and Alan have spoken to. That I just wanted to say that I've got a lot more to say about that because of the relationship between the police and the gangs, and it's almost like a separate paper that I should do. Well, I'll just give you a little intro to it. While I was in Chicago, I I researched the Ford Foundation's relationship to the major gangs, the Rangers and the Disciples. And the Ford Foundation flooded these organizations, these gangs, with money and encouraged their development. They were, according to the research I did, they were relatively small and insignificant before the Ford Foundation, and then the state authorities, of course, along with the Ford Foundation, promoted them as major gangs, you know, promoting them as dangerous and justifying, therefore, the increased role of the police. So you've got a dialectical polarity between the gangs promoted by the establishment and the police. We had the same thing in LA. I didn't do the research about foundation support for the gangs, but it is very clear in LA, in my experience there and everything I know about it, that the police encourage the gangs. In LA, it's the Crips and the Bloods as the two major gangs, and they dominate the community, creating an atmosphere of violence and a real terror. I mean, really terrify the young people, because the young people have to be careful whether they don't wear blue or black. I mean, blue or red, which are the two gang colors, and don't go in neighborhoods that are, it can't cross certain lines, etc. It's very restrictive in terms of how the community is controlled by gangs, which are under control of the state authorities and encouraged by the police. So I could talk a lot more about that, but just to give the idea that the community is not just facing the police, but it's facing internal enemies. And then, as Luke was talking about, the really horrendous treatment by welfare agencies that just belittle people and are intended to create docility. So the picture, though, isn't of attacks on black or brown or white. It's on the working class community. In this country, knowing very well that if those communities rise up, they are capable of becoming the catalyst for revolution in this country. And that fits in with what Alan was saying about the continued admiration for the Panthers, right? But I think next time we should definitely look at I think her name's Kenyatta something Taylor. Her video, very, very informative about how the Black liberation movement is the motion now that is the continuation of the struggles of the past. So anyway, so that's what I wanted to say, in addition to what has already been said, and on the question of the policing and control and domination over working class communities that have the potential to become the catalyst for revolution. Watts 1965 was the beginning. We've already spoken of Detroit and Newark in 67, 68. And then just again, in terms of what I can speak about, is I lived in South Central during the 1992 rebellion. And so I have a lot of personal experience of what it's like to be part of a community uprising. It was phenomenal, believe me. It was an unbelievable experience. And unfortunately, there are no political organizations capable of providing the direction that's needed to turn these mass movements into a real revolutionary force that can continue after the uprising. Nothing like that exists in LA, but it's it's quite amazing to be part of such an uprising. Anyway, but that's not what Shane asked me to talk about. He wanted me to talk about my experience with the Young Lords. Okay. So anyway, so Shane, do I have enough time to talk about? Yeah, I've got
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So while the Panthers and Alan was experiencing the Panthers in South Chicago, the Young Lords organization, well, first of all, let's just say the Young Lords gang was a large gang in the Puerto Rican community in Lakeview, near North Side. The Puerto Rican community in the United States, the diaspora, is more concentrated in Chicago and the Chicago area than anywhere else in the country. Very large Puerto Rican community. And
More than New York?
well, counting Peoria. Peoria is supposed to be the largest concentration. I don't have the data, but New York definitely has a lot of Puerto Ricans. So between, let's just say, the two urban centers together, but I'm pretty sure Chicago is, as not Chicago itself, but Peoria is the largest from the, old data, way back data from when I lived in Chicago. Anyway, it's working class. I mean, how to say that to the large extent, again, I don't have data, but just personal observation is that the Puerto Ricans don't have the same relationship to integrating into civil service jobs, into entrepreneurial activities that the Black community does, so that the Puerto Ricans are more of a working class community. The experience in the area where I was living was, again, of the police violence we've just talked about, the harassment, the daily indignities of being on welfare, all of that similar to what the Black community experienced. The particular issue that the Young Lords organization was concerned with was housing and and the particular role of the of St. Paul's um, uh, yeah, seminary, religious school, the St. Paul's Seminary, and expanding into the community, driving out the local residents, gentrifying and trying to transform the community. The Young Lords took that up as their main issue. Once they became a Young Lords organization rather than the Young Lords gang, they took that up as their issue, and we all participated in a sit-in that lasted 3 or 4 days. And my 3-month-old son had his first experience in in the in the movement. Yes, he was. Yeah, he had a good time. Anyway, and my husband at that time was the key negotiator. We won all our demands except the one that the community most felt was necessary, which is to take down the walls. They wanted to take down any fences or walls between the community and the seminary, and that didn't happen. But everything else was won. Anyway, so that's the kind of thing that was happening with the Young Lords. But mostly what I know is not the Young Lords. I did participate in that sit-in, but during the time that the Young Lords were being organized, I was working as a youth community organizer in a German-Italian neighborhood. And the kids there were organized much like the Black and and Puerto Rican youth into gangs, neighborhood gangs, groups, right? Of course, because they were white, they weren't called gangs, but it was
Yes, they
very,
were.
what?
Yeah, they were gangs. There were gangs on the north side. They were
No,
gangs.
no, 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 no. Wait, wait. But those. I'm not talking about the quote unquote gangs. I'm talking about the way young people organize into groups. I don't know how to say, distinguishing between the uptown gangs and the youth that I was working with. That's all. That's all. Just making a distinction.
My
These kids
my
are not called gangs. Okay.
my group was people called my group a gang. We were called a gang. We weren't
I
a gang,
know.
but that's what they called us. People who didn't like us, they called us a gang.
I know. That's what I'm trying to make the distinction that you were called a gang, you were black. The kids in my neighborhood who were similar, absolutely similar, just hung out together, were on the street, doing graffiti, whatever, running around, doing things that were delinquent, were not called gangs. That's all. I'm just making a
All right.
distinction, black and white.
Okay.
There's okay, and it's also very important in terms of what I was saying before about the organized gangs, the Crips and the Bloods, who are basically like the mafia. They're criminal organizations. And then
Yeah.
on the other hand, the young people who form themselves into gangs in the black and brown community who are, and they gave themselves names like the Great Street Crips, Okay, so they were five people who were just hanging out on the street, but they called themselves a gang, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
okay, I don't want to yeah, they were
Okay.
definitely white gangs, and I can talk more about that when I get to LA. But I'm just talking about kids in a neighborhood organizing, and because they were white, they weren't called a gang. That's all. Um,
Yeah.
okay, is that okay, Alan?
That's fine. There were gangs on the north side. I mean, actual gangs. There was a big gang way up north called Thorndale Jarvis, and
Yeah.
in the 60s, those were the kids we still call greasers because those kids were still in the 1950s, with the Elvis hair and all this other stuff.
Okay,
And
yes, yes,
everybody else
exactly.
was,
And my kids, the kids I was organizing were like that. They were greasers and they
yeah,
slicked their hair back and they talked
yeah.
like okay, yes, no. Okay.
Okay.
Um, we're just distinguishing between the organized criminal gangs and the little neighborhood gangs, right?
All right.
My little group
Okay.
was okay. Anyway, the leader of this group, Ronald Nelson, was was shot in the back in an alley by a cop who'd been harassing this little group of people, these group of kids, right? And the the significance of what happened is that the young people who were his friends were furious. They were absolutely insanely uh, furious and demanding justice. So as I was working with them, um, and with the help of a local church and these young people who were dedicated, committed, and organized, um, we were successful in bringing this Officer Nucio, to justice. The first step was organizing a large
He's
group of people.
I'm
What?
sorry, Cynthia. That's the cop who killed this kid was white too. That's the cop who killed the kid across the street from Wrigley Field
Yeah,
in
that's who we're
six
talking about.
in 68. Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember him.
yes,
Nuccio.
no, Nuccio, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah,
Okay. All right, go ahead.
that's the situation I was involved in. Okay,
He shot and killed a kid right across the street from Wrigley Field. That's where the Chicago Cubs play. And that was in June, I think, of 68. Was it not?
yes, yeah, that's
Okay.
Ronald Nelson, the young man I'm talking about.
That that's him. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
That's
Sorry.
okay, good. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's all
Right,
right.
right with you.
Okay,
Okay.
you're verifying the truth of what I'm saying, that this was,
All right.
yeah, but you didn't know I was there.
That's right.
No, I didn't. No. Okay.
And that, I mean, and really, it was the combination of my working for the Hull House, the Jane Addams Center, and the local church that was willing to get involved, that enabled the young people to make the drive that they did. And they organized their families, they organized the neighborhood, and so the big victory was bringing out so many people to the coroner's hearing that the coroner was forced to make a finding of homicide. And if that's what starts the whole process, if you don't get a finding of homicide from a coroner, you cannot move forward towards arrest and conviction. Anyway, so there were various stages of rallies and organizing the community, going to hearings, and then the young people testifying at court and holding their ground in the face of, blatant lies by organized police who were saying that Nelson was, threatening Nucio. No, they were like 20 feet away, and the only quote unquote weapon that Ron had was a knife, a small knife that he threw at Nucio and didn't even reach Nucio. Nucio shot him in the back as Ron turned around. So the question of any actual violence from the young man or was disputed by the witnesses who were these young people. So anyway, that's I wanted you to know that because that's the first time ever that a cop was arrested and convicted of murdering and a citizen murdering an innocent person. And let's see, I guess there's okay. I think the next thing to say is that going back to the statistics of all the police killings that have occurred, 1% are arrested and 0.3% are convicted. And the convictions usually only occur when there's some major scandal involving numbers of police, but the individuals are never convicted. And so Nucio and the work that these young people did stands out as compared to the experience of most. I've read and been told that this experience is used by police academies throughout the country as an example. And you can imagine what they're doing. They're saying it's an example not to prevent the killing, but to prevent being caught. And so, yeah. Anyway, so again, that what I want to bring out in this is the relationship between, on the one hand, the police, and on the other hand, the organized movement, and that in this case was successful in bringing justice. Just as a little footnote, a year later on appeal, Nucio was let free on the basis that all the witnesses were incompetent because they were teenagers. So just that's our justice system. It's not just the police. That's our justice system. So what else? Okay, we've already spoken of the Young Lords and the Young Patriots, who are the organization of Appalachian Whites in Uptown Chicago, and the Panthers as the beginning of the Rainbow Coalition. I don't know what else.
Just, I'd like to make a point here for Clark before we end, so there won't be any confusion. Um, I think that Alan is correct in terms of the whole atmospherics around the Panthers. But there's another important point that Luke made, and which came as a result of, as I said before, an investigation. The Panthers were thoroughly penetrated by the police and subjected to extreme harassment. A lot of that came basically from, again, as Luke pointed out, that they recruited on the streets. And here I'm saying this because we have to not to treat the concept of the lumpen proletariat as a pejorative, but as a category, as a social category. And we can refer to class struggles in France to understand what Marx had to say on this. But I think Luke made a very important distinction, which I don't want to see missed. When you look at the situation in Detroit and where they start organizing, there were some very objective factors which determined a course of action. Namely, they were encountering people who were disciplined by the productive process, by organizing actual production workers, which in itself is typically unusual from that standpoint, except for the kind of conditions which confronted the black workers at the time. The union was not representing them because they were black. And so therefore we had to take up the struggle to make an organization which is supposed to represent workers to represent the workers. The second thing that was important, that because they were black, they were experiencing extreme exploitation at the point of production. Last hired, first fired, most dangerous, dirty jobs, and everything else. And that there was an organic connection between those conditions in the plant and the conditions in the community from which these workers came and lived that made the situation extremely explosive and volatile. Because you cannot forget that that population in Detroit was highly compressed due to urban renewal, segregation, and so forth. So it's not a question. The League and Precursor League actually explored and investigated both settings. As I was part of a contingent that went to Chicago to look at the Panther organization as a possible way of organizing. And work was done with trying to even work with a Panther organization in Detroit. So the thing about it is, it's very important that this is social phenomena which objectively occur because of objective conditions. And I think George's point is very important. Certainly, the movement, because of the oppression and exploitation experienced by black folks, constantly throws up resistance and slogans and symbols of resistance. But the thing we got to is that they are typically co-opted, stolen, so forth by the ruling class. They are very sensitive to these things, and they will do whatever they can buy them off. And the fact that they're not successful with this tactic and leads them to do more extreme things, like the attack on DEI and so forth that Luke wrote about most recently. So I think and this is why I'm glad we're having this extra session, because we can pursue these persons in more detail and scientifically next week. Okay.
Alan, did you have something you wanted to say, or?
Yes, just a little bit.
Yeah, just to finish off. Yep.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I was looking in the chat, and I see where people put up links to further documentaries and things like that. I just wanted to add to that. I don't have the link to it, but I'll look for it. There was a documentary that came out. I think it was produced, Wiley, by WTTW, Channel 11. which is the PBS station in Chicago. It was in 2019, which was the 50th anniversary of the murder of Fred Hampton. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it was a documentary about the Panthers in Chicago with Fred Hampton. Anyway, when the Rainbow Coalition was announced, it was formed, there were several members of the Illinois chapter of the party who quit. Uh, they because they were against uniting with the Young Patriots, and the reason they were against uniting with the Young Patriots was because yes, they were whites from Appalachia. They were, you know, Southerners, but the Young Patriots on their jackets wore a Confederate flag patch on on their jacket, and it was the Confederate flag that some of those Panther members couldn't accept, and they couldn't accept uniting with a group that wears a Confederate flag, you know, and so they quit, which raises this thing that Wiley and I have discussed, you know, about how does an African American become conscious? You know, where does an African American first become conscious? And it in my case, speaking for myself, as a
Yeah,
nationalist.
yeah.
I mean, when I was 16 years old playing basketball in the park, and I hear about Huey Newton, I had just read The Wretched of the Earth. And I heard about the Wretched of the Earth from the nationalists. The nationalists were simply the older dudes, you know, older than us, who we looked up and listened to. So why that? It's because we're black. And I mean, the first thing you notice is that bad things are happening to us, and it's because of the color of our skin, you know? And yeah, and so it's black skin is where you first become conscious. Some people never some people never advance from that. Some people they just stay there. But what actually happened in real time was that a lot of people who did start out just, you know, thinking about black power and black is beautiful and all this other stuff, eventually they develop and evolve, and they transition out of racial consciousness, color consciousness, into social consciousness and class consciousness,
Right,
and
right.
you know, some of us become Marxists, you know, and stuff like that. But I kid you not, you know, some of us even become Marxists. And but where did we begin? Where does a black revolutionary begin? Malcolm X was a nationalist. I mean, when he came out of prison, he wasn't a revolutionary internationalist, you know, you know, sitting down with Che Guevara and all that stuff. He was a black nationalist in the Nation of Islam. Getting kicked out of the Nation of Islam in 1964, like he did, woke Malcolm up. His trip in his autobiography, which we all read. I mean, I read it. All of us kids playing basketball in the park, we read it. In his autobiography, he talks about his pilgrimage to Mecca. Muhammad told him that Islam was the natural religion of the black man. But Malcolm gets to Mecca and he sees Muslims from all over the world, you know, from Indonesia and you know, African continent, even Muslims with white skin, blonde hair, and blue eye, who I suspect were from Yugoslavia, you know, or Turkey or someplace like that.
Mm.
And this is Malcolm. This took Malcolm by surprise. It was a great turning point in the last months of his life, and it completely changed his direction. He saw that Elijah Muhammad was wrong, and B, he understood that the freedom struggle of the African American people really was part and parcel of a worldwide struggle for national liberation. I mean, it was easy. It was the easiest thing in the world to see. So, you know, there we that has to be sometimes sometimes some of the communists uh some of the communists kind of don't get that part about, you know, about nationalists, you know, they're bad, you know, even the cultural nationalists who are bad. But I mean, even so, they're just they're nationalists because that's because of America. America makes you a nationalist before it makes you a communist. If you know, if you're black,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, it
So,
does. It's a real thing. I told Wiley the other day. I mean, it's a real material thing, you know. But you know what we know is that just because you start out as a nationalist doesn't mean you stay one. You know, you don't have to. Uh, if, Fred had to have been a nationalist when he started out, but he wasn't one when he died. You know, so I just wanted to throw that in. But if I find this documentary, this WTTW documentary, it was very good. It came out in 2019.
It's already in
Yes.
chat. It's already in the chat. Jennifer's got it.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Jennifer got it in the chat, and it is on YouTube. I found it on YouTube. I went to YouTube.
Excellent. Okay, very good. Thank you. I'll stop.
There's plenty, and there's the Malcolm X movie and the Panther movie, and I mean they're movies, right? So you have to, they're not documentaries. I think the Panther one captures a bit of some of listening, like just with my ears, you know, it captures some of the spirit of the times, you know, like that sort of, you know, angry black masculinity and the taking up of arms, and you know, I mean, often the pig is not a very useful political slogan, but in the immediacy of it, you know, it's like, you know, we've got an enemy and we're fighting that, and that thing about nationalism to socialism, I guess we'd say that's
right.
Fanon, right? Fanon's talking about
to internationalism.
But at least like Fanon says, the way Fanon frames it is, you know, he says you start off, you know, in a racialized society looking up at the white man, and and the cultural nationalism. At least you're looking around at black people. You're looking around. So at least we're on the same level now. Then you start to realize, well, there's enemies on both sides of the color line and stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks to Luke for your thoughts. If you want to come back and continue the discussion next week, you're most welcome.
Okay.
I
have some family obligations next Sunday.
Okay. Well, always welcome back anytime.
Okay.
I wanted to have a yarn to you about oral history too, so I shall contact you about an oral history project that I have that you might be able to just help throw it around. I need someone with the politics, you know. It's not racial politics, but communist politics. So I'm sure you'll have a take on it. And if Alan wanted to send me his presentation, if you wanted to do that, Alan, I'll put it around with the things. And
okay, I
and
will.
Cynthia, that was great. That was great too.
Cynthia wrote something too, I think, or maybe I'm not. But anyway, no.
If you want, did you write something, Cynthia? We can put it around.
It's written out. Yeah.
If you want to send that, we'll put it around. It was the only problem is that, you know, I feel like you could all talk for another hour and we'd still be learning. So we've only scratched the surface. We have next week to try to bring it together and see what we can come up with. So I'll put some thoughts on paper to provoke a discussion next week. Right out. Okay. Thanks all. That was great. Take care.
Thank you all. Thank you, Luke. Thank you.
Luke, thank you very much, Luke.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody.
Great